Winter is coming. Winter is coming, brothers and sisters. What an amazing high it's been going through these scriptures. Just pulling it all apart and looking at the behavior and going, how are we supposed to live today in the 21st century? We've been through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and now we come to Judges. And that's why I've gone with a Game of Thrones. A bit bleak, you know, because I really was not motivated to get into this book at all. Like from the bits that I had read, it's like, okay, it's like rooting for your favorite sports team. Not that I'm into sport, but you know, really cheering for Yeshua. Come on, you can do it, you can do it. It's going, it's happening. And then you know that winter is coming. It's about to go downhill from here. So I wasn't excited about it, but once I got into it, of course, it parallels our lives today in the 21st century, and it's going to be an amazing help to all of us, as all the living words are. So demon powers are coming at you to knock you off the path, to stop you, to stop me, to stop this message. particularly this simple message of deliverance to get out into the world, because time is very short. So let's go on today to syncretism. Syncretism, it sounds like a complicated word, it just means mixture. So, and we're going to go into it. This is just the introduction today to Judges, just to wet your whistle a bit, to let you see the context of where we're going in the next month or two. So let's go into it. Once again, our good old theme of sun worship is here again. Sun worship, 6,000 years and still going strong. There's your hint, there's a golden calf in there. You can see a Mazzaroth sun wheel in the background, and we're going to talk about syncretism as our overriding theme. So we've got a fair bit of reading to do today, just because I just found this amazing, as I always do when I dive into these books. The gems are phenomenal. So let's go into it, guys. Syncretism, our introduction to Judges. Remember, Joshua's just died and he's renewed, lifted up the blood covenant with Israel once again. Even though he said to him, you're not going to do this, right? You can't even get rid of all your other idols. Oh, we will. Yeah, sure. Judges is one of the lesser read books of the scripture. And many just don't know what to do with it because it significantly parallels the modern age of Babylonian religion that has become the 21st century norm today. 21st century norm today is Babylonian religion. I'm sorry if you didn't realize that. Even if you call yourself secular, you are still following the mindsets and cultures and customs of the world, which has its foundations in Babylon. So the whole world is caught up in this Babylonian religion. So yes, what Israel does after the death of Joshua is exactly what is happening in the world today. Exactly. That's why we need to read this and go into it and see how Yahusha feels, how he operates, how he moves, who he uses. So just when you thought it was safe to go back into the promised land, something's going to happen. So this is our book of Judges. Anyone raised in scripture tends to know of the book of Judges only from the story of Samson and Delilah, a favourite among children's Sunday school teachers. Who could ever forget about the handsome and charismatic young man with the long locks that were the secret of his superhuman strength, and the beautiful woman who seduced him and betrayed him to his enemies? The story is usually told as a tale of an incredible Hebrew Hulk that took on the wicked Philistines that were a nightmare in the lives of a good portion of the 12 Israelite tribes at that time. Why were they a nightmare? Because they didn't get rid of them like they were supposed to. So it's good coming from the journey we've been on and looking at the way we've looked at it. Joshua didn't get rid of all the tribes like he was supposed to, so now they're going to cause them havoc. The finale, this is the life of Samson, the finale has Samson sacrificing his own life as a courageous martyr in order to destroy the pagan temple of Dagon, while killing many of the Philistine priests and deities in the process. Unfortunately, the way the story is commonly told usually misses the point and miscasts the role of the characters, especially Samson, much the way King Solomon is commonly miscast, as an extraordinarily wise and regal figure just going about doing Yahusha's work in a way that Yahusha approves. That's how we've always been, that's the way we've been taught about these characters, isn't it? In our lives, in religion. King Solomon, the wisest king there was. Samson, powerful, mighty, wise, all these things. No, nothing could be further from the truth in either case. And we'll look into that when we get to each chapter. But there are few more critical eras. There are few more critical eras in Israel's development than the one displayed here in the book of Judges. This is the era that Israel slid rapidly towards national suicide due to their determined apostasy from Yahusha. And when we take the proper perspective of this historical record, it is one of great sadness and of a self-delusional people who insist on one hand that they are being obedient to Yahusha. We are. But on the other hand, vigorously pursue peace and friendship at any price with their pagan neighbours. And the price for this peace is invariably voluntary assimilation and blending. It's what syncretism means. Assimilation and blending into the pagan cultures and the mystery Babylonian religious systems that the whole remainder of the known world revelled in and still does revel in Yahusha's face. So instead of standing up and being an example, they joined them. So we see three major themes developed in Judges. One, Yisrael's military and spiritual struggles as they wrestle among themselves and battle with the remaining Canaanites that Joshua failed to drive out, in order to settle within the land and create a lasting and more durable society of farmers, shepherds and craftsmen. They just want to have a normal life with normal friendships, with normal family relationships. I don't want all this drama. I don't want all this stuff. You heard this before? I just want to blend in and be normal. Why can't we be normal? You know? So, number two, the amazing favour. This is the second thing we see. The amazing favour and long suffering, but not infinite, patience of Yahusha to the blood covenant he made with Yisrael, as opposed to the amazing disinterest and schizophrenic behaviour of Yisrael in their lack of obedience in return. So, and the third theme we're going to see in Judges is the Canaanization of Yisrael, and how the people of Yahusha became more and more like the world around them instead of staying separate from the world, or their lives influencing the world around them to be more like Yisrael. And the world all around Yisrael at this time was the various Canaanite tribes and peoples. Remember when Yahusha brought them, there were scriptures all back when we were talking about Exodus and the Yahusha's deliverance from Egypt. He talked about how these people who were chosen of nothing good, they'd done nothing of themselves. They weren't chosen for anything good they'd done. They were chosen because of his amazing favour and because of a promise that he'd made to Abraham. He chose them to be a shining light, a beacon, an example in the world of what having me, your creator, in your camp, in your nation, what my presence will do for your lives. And once he'd set up and taken them through the process and was going to establish them as his bride and the royal nation, city, of his people, that was to be an example for all the world. It wasn't just to be for the Hebrews, it was to be for all the world. And it was to start right here at ground zero. He took back a little bit of his time and his space. He took back his Shabbat day, and he took back a little bit of his space in that tabernacle from where he could start moving in this world. But the people he chose kept kicking at the prods, didn't they? They would not be an example. And here we see them go full on, in your face, get stuffed. We're not going to be your example. So, but that was the whole purpose. They were supposed to be set apart and be an example, and they didn't. They joined the world. We will witness Yisrael being oppressed in many ways by a number of enemies, but not so much that they were forcibly dragged, kicking and screaming into idolatry. No. Rather, Yisrael preferred, this is in the book of Judges we're talking, later on when they go into Babylonian and Syrian captivity, it was a lot harder for them. There was a lot more at them and on them to go into idolatry, which they were already in anyway. That's why they got kicked out in the first place and divorced. So they were oppressed here in Judges. They start getting oppressed, but not to the point where they were forcibly dragged, kicking and screaming into idolatry. No. Rather, Yisrael preferred more of the pagan deities that the world enjoyed and less of their own Elohim, because it seemed not only the more tolerant thing to do, but also it was more economically and socially acceptable. Just to get along, just to get along, yeah. Let's be tolerant of each other's beliefs, yeah. Got to do that. 21st century. So, in the days of the judges, there was a remnant of Israelite leaders that warned and begged the people to wake up. It wasn't the judges though, so don't get the wrong idea. It wasn't the judges that were doing this. There was just a small remnant that still remembered Joshua. And that warned and begged the people to wake up and recognize how their belief had been seduced and co-opted by other Israelite leaders who sought only to further their private agendas or to blend in with their neighbours and thus gain wider acceptance. In opposition to this remnant of obedient folk, was the ever-growing majority of Israelites and other leaders that said that the current situation demands that the definition of good and evil, clean and unclean behaviour, or sin, if you're in the King James, in your Bibles, sin. They're saying the definition of good and evil, clean and unclean, as explained in Moses' instructions, as explained in the Torah, that's got to be altered. It's got to be altered. The definition of good and evil must be altered. And that peace with their neighbours was more important. Peace with their neighbours was more important and a greater good than obedience to an ancient decree about sacred land holdings or full devotion to their one Elohim and his instructions. Interesting, this is how the nation starts putting pressure on everybody, the priesthood, everybody. We've got to change these instructions. They're not relevant for today. Don't at all hear me saying once in the last 2 years of these videos that the instructions are not relevant today. That is not why I'm rewording them. And even though I'm getting rid of a lot of the ancient land holdings and that stuff, like we did at the end of Joshua, the theme of behaviour is timeless. It's what he's wanted from his bride from the Garden of Eden, and it's what he's expecting, mature behaviour in his bride when he returns. Otherwise, she won't be his bride. That is the theme of the scripture. Obedience to his instructions, which will make you perfect. Obedience to his instructions, which will bring you to maturity. That is the whole theme of the scriptures. If you want to put the theme of the instruction, if you want to put the 66 books of instructions into one sentence, it is obedience brings maturity. Yeah? So that is the key to the behavior revolution scriptures. We're simplifying it down to get rid of all the complicated stuff that does get in the way in the 21st century. But nowhere am I saying that the instructions need to be changed. Behavior is transformed, not to suit the world, but to suit the age that we live in, but not what they're saying here, not at all. And there's a little picture here of what one of the main themes of Judges is. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Usher in the 21st century, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Do what you feel you want to do. Just listen to your heart. You've got to listen to your heart. Be truthful to yourself. Do what you think is right, you know? That's the 21st century branding and logo, isn't it? Do what you want. If it feels good, do it. Just as the Israelites detoured nearly overnight from their golden era of obedience and belief to Yahusha as they conquered Canaan and celebrated victory after victory in the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, we see them taking a devastating turn down a path of darkness, all the while calling it light and progress. They're going down a path of darkness, yet they are calling it light and progress. It was only a matter of a couple of decades after Joshua's death that we find Israel steeped in idol worship and oppression, all of it at their own hand. Steeped in idol worship and oppression. That could even be an equals sign. Idolatry equals oppression. Idolatry, disobedience, idol worship, putting things above Yahusha brings oppression. What do you see in the world today? And it's all our own fault. So let's get into the nuts and bolts a little bit here. The title of the book, Judges. Why is it called Judges? My wife and I started watching a show called All Rise. It's about a young black judge. She's gone from the district attorney's office to become a judge, and all the transitions and cases she takes on. It's very interesting timing too coming into this. Why is this book called the Book of Judges? This book could easily conjure up a false image of its meaning, and in 21st century minds, just what their function was in the centuries in between Joshua and the first king of Israel. This book of Judges kind of spans what happens between the death of Joshua to the first king of Israel. The English title, Book of Judges, comes from the Latin liber judicum, which comes from the Greek kritai, which indeed means judge, just as we think of it. But in all cases, these words are just an attempt to translate the Hebrew word Shophetim. Where do you go back to if you want the true understanding? You go back to the Hebrew, and the Hebrew word is Shophetim. We must not think, here we go, we must not think of this kind of judge, as portrayed in the Book of Judges, as a person who sits behind a bench in dark robes, determining guilt or innocence of an accused. That's not what this word judge means. While some of the Shophetim may have done this occasionally, these folks did not operate in the legal sphere. Rather, they were more like deliverers, rescuers, or rulers, raised up for a season and usually for a limited purpose among an equally limited group of Israelite tribes. Yep, these judges were only for certain tribes, not all the tribes. They were not national leaders, they were regional leaders. So unlike Moses, Aaron, Joshua, who ruled the entire nation, led the entire nation, these guys and girls that were raised up for a short time, season, were just for certain tribes. They were just problem solvers, problem solvers. They come in there and deliver, rescue, or rule, oversee, help, get Yisrael, whatever tribe it was, get them out of this problem they're in. So Yahusha sent them to do that, to help them, to deliver them. That's a better word. It's not the same, it's not synonymous with, judges. Shophetim is not synonymous with deliverer, but the idea of a deliverer or someone who rescues you, comes along and rescues you, is a better understanding of this word Shophetim. Whereas the word judge, even though we're going to use it for English easiness, the word judge is more from the Greek and the Latin and conjures up the wrong idea. So we're still going to call it judges because we still want to make it easy. But if you want to understand these guys' role, it's more like a deliverer. It is difficult to find the words to describe the role of a shophet, which is the singular form of Shophetim. Difficult to find the words to describe the role of a shophet, partly because they didn't all do the same things, nor were the skill sets and attributes of these several judges the same. They all did different things. If we use the term deliverer in a general sense to partially define their purpose, it does help us get the picture. Think about Yahusha's role and it helps us to grasp the office of a shophet, especially when Yahusha explained that he came not to judge, not to hand out judgment, but to deliver. So understand the role that Yahusha played when he first came to earth, his first coming, and you'll understand more of what these guys were on about, raised up just to help, to deliver, to rescue. In other words, at Yahusha's first coming, in his role as the Son of Man, or the son of Joseph, the suffering servant, he definitely did not come to be a judge of mankind, but rather to deliver us from evil and our self-inflicted predicament, that we might not face judgment later. Yeah? However, at his future second coming, he will come in an entirely different role as the son of David, the warrior king. He will not come as a deliverer, not as a shophet, but as one who carries out the justice of an almighty creator and comes as one who judges, as from the bench, and orders sentences carried out. Understand that? So the first time he came more as a shophet, as a deliverer, rescuer, saviour. The second time he's coming as a conquering king, and he will judge, particularly at the great white throne. He will judge. So like our Messiah, these Shophetim of the book of Judges were sent by Yahusha to deliver certain segments of Yisrael from whatever their current predicament, as opposed to sending them to render judicial judgments against Yisrael. There were a number of Shophetim raised up by Yahusha for Yisrael, and the book of Judges identifies about 12 or 13 if you count Deborah. Interesting. We're going to go into all this. This is just preliminary groundwork. So, when was Judges written? I want to know when Judges was written. Well, it certainly had to be after all the events of the book of Judges had occurred. And it had to be sometime after the time of Saul, because the last words of the book of Judges says that everything written in the book happened before there was a king over Israel. So the writer knew when that first king was anointed. That means it had to have been written around 1025 BC or later. We can probably narrow it down a little better because the writer of Judges tells us that the city of Giza was still under control of the Canaanites at the time it was written. And we know that by the time of King Solomon, Israel had gained control over Giza from the Philistines. So it was probably written during the early days of King David, when he was only king over Judah, and before he became king over a united Israel that included the 10 tribes of the northern era, that was dominated by the Israelite tribe of Ephraim. So perhaps 990 to 995 BCE it was written. Okay. The important thing is that it was written soon after the period of the Judges, so the information can be taken as historically reliable. It was written just after the time it was talking about, so it's accurate. And most agree that the prophet Samuel is the author of Judges. So, and of course the book of Samuel is where we're going after Judges. So it's pretty accurate. It's right there when it happened, so we can just be happy with that, yeah? The book of Judges, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Now, from a political standpoint, the era of the Judges is an extended time of instability for the 12 tribes and Levi, the priesthood. They had no central leadership as they had under Joshua. No central leadership as they had under Joshua. That said, they were supposed to have looked towards Yahusha as their king, supposed to. And his will was to be established by means of the priesthood, the book of the instructions written by Moses, as well as liberal use of the Urim and Thummim stones for decision making and seeking the will of Yahusha. So they were supposed to be looking towards the priesthood, kind of as national rulers in a sense, the moral compass. The book of the instructions, I mean, how many times have we talked about that? Raised up firstly, officially at Sinai, and you know, how many times was it carved in stone, written on, etched in stone, whitewashed stones, written again, raised up. Don't forget to tell your children. All this about the instructions, as well as the liberal use of the Urim and Thummim stones for decision making and seeking the will of Yahusha. So the priesthood was to have performed to a degree as the central government for the 12 tribes. But a better characterization of their intended purpose was as Yisrael's central conscience and moral compass. And in some ways it fulfilled that function, but rapidly lost its hold as each tribe decided to do things their own way. The priesthood started doing it pretty good. The tribes wouldn't follow them. They started ruling and having official judgments and laws and legal. Yeah, they did it all their own way. See, in their own eyes. Each one did what was right according in their own eyes, you know. So they didn't come together, wouldn't come together in one mind. So now we come to the crux of this study. Why can't we all just get along? Why can't I just have a normal life? Why you gotta always talk about this and talk about that? And why can't we coexist? This is a huge movement. If you don't know about this, it started many years ago. Coexist. That's what those letters are supposed to make. They're made up of obviously religious symbols, because all the religions want to come together in peace and have peace. Why can't we all just get along? This is where it all started, back in Babylon. This is where Yisrael really fell for it. The overall situation that existed for the 12 tribes in the land as the era transitioned from Joshua to Judges was from a strong central leadership and a common cause to an ill-defined governmental structure that supposedly had Yahusha as their king and the priesthood as his earthly messengers. But in reality, it was closer to every man for himself. That's what it was supposed to be, Yahusha their king, and the priesthood as his earthly messengers. But in reality, it was closer to every man for himself. First is that just as in any system of society, there was not a monolithic train of thought or behavior among the Hebrews of the land. What does that mean? They refused to think the same as Yahusha commanded. Isn't that what he commanded? For everyone to think the same? He says that still today. The body must behave, think the same. Be together, be as one as I am one. Be of one mind, you know. But there was not a monolithic train of thought or behavior among the Hebrews. The high standards and ideals demanded by Yahusha and demonstrated by Moses and Joshua, and at least for a short time, Joshua's immediate successors, they weren't necessarily emulated or even admired by the Israelites in general. They had more practical matters to deal with, such as raising families, growing crops, tending vines, and shepherding flocks. And we must not fail to put into the back of our mind the reality that one of Joshua's last acts was to have a blood covenant renewal ceremony during which he pleaded with the people to get rid of their false deities and idols. Pleaded with them. Oh no, we will. Yahusha's our Elohim. Yeah, not the only one though. None of this boded well for the character of Israel. This was their problem. Yahusha declared that I am the only one. I am Yahuwah. And Satan up here is polytheistic system of worldly religion. We went through this back in Deuteronomy. Satan's ploy all along to bring all these things into our lives that mean something. They may not be people like this, but they are things that we love to get into, put our mind and affections on. Next is that Joshua's inability to lead Yisrael to a total and complete conquest of Yisrael, and not only that, his and his elders and tribal princes' decision to make peace treaties with the various Canaanite tribes instead of driving them out of the land or destroying them as Yahusha demanded. This was going to prove to be Yisrael's Achilles heel, their downfall, the fact that they did not drive them out. You know, they're abominable. There's certain things in Yahusha's economy that he will not tolerate, will not have long suffering for, will not tolerate at all. Noah's Ark, wipe them all out, you know. Sodom and Gomorrah, wipe them all out, you know. Egypt wiped most of them out too, you know, and now he's saying, wipe them out. He said, drive them out. You don't have to kill them, but just get them out of my land. It's my land, not yours. You can live in it, but you've got to drive out all these people because they're doing abominable behavior. And we went through all that in Leviticus and Numbers, all the things that Yahusha considers abominable behavior, which is just normal custom today, but it's abominable behavior. And he says, drive them out. Joshua drove out 90% of it, but he didn't finish it, and it's going to be Israel's downfall, their Achilles heel. In a nutshell, Israel quickly adapted to the idea of having the Canaanites as neighbours and tried to find ways to live among them in peace. Naturally, compromise and tolerance was the word of the day. The 12 tribes lost any enthusiasm to finish what they had started and complete the conquest of Canaan. The result of that decision is the root of troubles we witness in the Middle East today. I mean, look towards the end of Joshua. He had to come and put firecrackers under their ass. Come on. It's been years and 9 of you bloody tribes aren't even in your lands yet. You're still stuck out there, camping in your bloody tents. What's going on? Yahusha's given us this land. We've driven out most of the enemy. Go into your individual spots. Kick out the rest of them. Live long and prosper. How's it go? Live long and prosper, So, but they wouldn't do it. Lazy. Wanted, no, we'll be all right. She'll be right, mate. Settle down, Joshua. Just chill, bro. Have a couple of tinnies. Put your feet up. So, see the difference in attitude? We're going to see that as a result of this lax attitude, that mixed marriages between Hebrews and Canaanites became quite a normal and accepted arrangement in a startling short time. That was one of the instructions too, that Joshua said to them. Do not intermarry with these people. Don't hang around them. Don't befriend them. It's going to be your downfall. He knew the weakness of their character and what they'd come out of in Egypt, and he knew what would happen. So he said, don't have anything to do with them. But this lax attitude meant they started marrying. Not only did they not drive them out, they started marrying them as well. But because of the way ancient societies operated, this meant that there must be a compromise or a clash over the issue of whose deity would be dominant in that blended family. Yahusha or one of the Baal deities. Who was going to be dominant, Yahusha or one of the Baal mystery religious deities? And one can imagine that this made family situations pretty tense at times. I can tell you from experience being in a blended family that when you've got different parents to different children, all trying to love each other and someone else's children as well, and both sides bring into a family different. You didn't grow up necessarily or come into it before your children were born, so you haven't had all that time together to grow into the family that you're meant to be. So you're coming to the household with two differing belief systems. It could be two different, even if you're both worldly, two differing worldly systems, behaviors, way of doing things. And you've got to work in and make it all work. There has to be a kind of a syncretism in a way, but it can't be a this is my way, not your way. And it can't be on the other side either, this is my way, not your way. We both have to say it, this is your way, this is my way, let's bring it together. What's Yahusha's way? How does he want us to do it? So I'm just looking through a mirror over here because I'm switched my camera around today, so I'm experimenting with different angles. So if I look like I'm looking off into the distance, that's why. So coming from a blended family, this makes sense. Ours isn't so much an idolatry thing, but behavior is an idolatry, isn't it? So it really is the same today in the 21st century. You've got two differing parties coming together, often clashing, saying, why the hell are we doing it this way? Why do you do things that way? Because that's how I was brought up, and vice versa. So this is how it was here, only theirs was physical, literal gold, silver, stone idols. And they weren't just little ornaments, this is what our life revolves around. Don't forget to take your idols out into the field, otherwise we won't get a blessed harvest. Whenever they traveled somewhere, they'd take their idols with them. Because the idols were territorial, remember? So they needed to be protected. It's all mad, but this is how they thought. So syncretism is blending different religious beliefs, philosophies or practices into something new. Putting all the different scraps of beliefs and meat into the sausage machine and spitting out a new thing that keeps everybody happy. The result of two widely different cultures mixing in such a way is unavoidable. Syncretism. Syncretism, which comes from the word synchronize, and we all generally understand that to synchronize something is to make two or more things operate simultaneously or in a coordinated way. Synchronized swimming, they all have to move the same way, all their legs, their arms have to move, they have to synchronize. Same as tight dancing squads as well, they have to dance, they all have to move, they're synchronized. That's what they look for in the dance competitions. And of course, synchronizing a stopwatch, it's got to be to the second. You get this idea of what synchronizing something is, taking two different beliefs. How you see that a lot today, people, well, I'm Christian, well, I'm Jewish. How are we going to raise our child? Somehow we've got to work a way to work so everybody's happy. You see what I mean? It's a big thing today. So, syncretism is an attempt to reconcile two different moral or religious systems and mold them into something else that retains elements of both. Retains elements of both to keep both parties happy. Retains elements of both and thus is reasonably acceptable for all parties. And over here, what used to be pagan still is. It's still pagan, it's still witchcraft, it's still abominable behavior, even though it may have been synchronized. It's still the same behavior, the same worship practices, it's still an abomination. So, what does that mean? When it comes to daily worship in those ancient times, that meant that someone's deity had to take an inferior position and another person's deity took a superior position. But both were retained, or both persons' deities might be given generally equal status, with generally given status, with equal recognition and equal authority. This is interesting. Rarely is this process of blending and harmonizing, syncretism, rarely is this process of blending and harmonizing two religious systems and deity pantheons done at a bargaining table. Rarely is this done on purpose or at a bargaining table. Or is it even really a conscious effort? It's really just two families trying to come together. Why have you got your deities up on the mantle? I want to put mine up there too. You know, even though the Hebrews wouldn't have had, Yahusha does not and demanded that he not be represented via anything made of gold or stone. You can't put an image to him. But they would have made it pretty clear, the Hebrews, that he's our deity. But the Canaanites, as they married in, men or women would have said, no, we've got to have ours too. That's not where we came from. We worship this deity and that deity. So it all came together. But rarely did it happen on purpose. It was more a case of the families trying to get together and get along. However, it does happen. It does happen on purpose, just as with Constantine and the councils of Nicaea and Laodicea, when the national pagan system of Mithraism was blended with the scriptures of some sort, given new names and practices, churned up and spat out as the new hybrid sun worship abomination Christianity. And Constantine became the first pope of this global Christendom. I wrote a song about that years ago. We might chuck that at the end. So this incident was done on purpose. The enemy was behind it. The Mazzaroth system. All the religions use this system. It's not just the secular people. What's your star sign? What did the stars say? What's your zodiac? You know, all, even the Jews are right into this. The Jews, yeah, they're right into this too. It's written all over the temple walls, remember? So, even though this situation here in the blue was done on purpose, quite dramatically, and you know, by pain of death, you know, if you're not going to rest on the Shabbat day, it's now, stuff this Shabbat day, it's now Sunday, day of the sun. Sol Invictio, or whatever they said, you know, it's all worship of the sun deity. So You're not allowed to work on the Sunday now, under decree of death. Usually though, this process of hybridizing and compromising happens quietly and naturally over time, slowly and without much deliberation, fanfare or overt intent. One moment Yahusha is your only Elohim, who you give your full devotion, but then you marry a Canaanite who worships the Baals. And a few years later you suddenly look up to realize that not only is Yahusha no longer your only Elohim, he holds an equal or inferior position to another deity. What was foreign is no longer strange. And then a little more time passes, and now the syncretism becomes cemented, and a whole new system has been created, and any questioning of the rightness or wrongness of it has disappeared. Any memory of how it happened becomes irrelevant, or at times lost to history. And that's where we find ourselves today. Christmas is wonderful, Easter, Valentine's, birthdays, it's all wonderful. Any memory of how it happened is lost, irrelevant. It's a new system has been created, it's been churned up, all the meanings and truth of it, it's been washed away by history, and we spit it out as a new system, but it's still the same one. It's still the same behavior, and Yahusha hates it because it is idolatry. Idolatry. Why can't we all come together? Are the wheels turning in your minds right about now? Religion has been engaged in syncretism for centuries. Centuries. It's been happening since the beginning, really, but in a big time, in the modern age, for centuries. As mentioned, the predominant incident of religious syncretism that comes to mind was when the pagan religions of the sun-worshipping world, Mithraism, were blended with the messianic religion that the Jews had come up with through the Babylonian and Assyrian captivity of the tribes of Israel. I mean, they'd been divorced. They'd been sent off into captivity because of their disobedience. But the remnants of that belief that they held on to, the foundation of it was truth. What they did to it and formed from it was all madness, but the foundation of it, that was mixed with the sun-worshipping world, and the result was the Roman religion in the West and the Orthodox religion in the East. How can we have so many religions that all use the scripture as their basis and all hate each other's guts and all think the other one's going to hell? How can that be? Because the truth of the scripture, the original words, were taken by many different people, put into a machine, remember the machine? Churned up and spat out into a new way of doing things. But the new way is just still the old way. The process of Christian syncretism with the world's cultures long ago passed the tipping point. Long ago past the tipping point. And now practically every demographic and behavior that can be applied to the world is every demographic and behavior that can be applied to the world in general is the same as religion in general. Same behavior. Look at the world and look at religion. They're all the same. Marriage, divorce, abortion, criminal activity, and more recently, sexual orientation is nearly indistinguishable between the world and the churchgoers, which is another clue that it's all Satan's system of behavior, eh? That's all the world system. I've come out of all that. I'm not in the religion anymore. I'm just living a normal, secular life. It's the same system. The world and religion is all the same. It's all controlled by the dragon. And of course, the culture and behavior that has won out in this constant blending of religion and the world is that of the majority, which is the unbelieving world. This is the nature of syncretism. The majority always dominates. The interbelief movement is currently advancing religious syncretism like a cancer in our time. The interbelief movement, what's that? Let's look into it. The interbelief movement is spreading like a cancer and is being touted as and admired by many of the top Christian and Jewish leaders. Of course, the top secular leaders too, the world over. And what was originally intended to harmonise the many insane Christian doctrines among the thousands of crazy denominations to foster a false sense of unity, that is now attempting to harmonise Islam with Christianity. This is what the interbelief movement is. ℏ𝕬𝕗 and all these stupid things. And then, of course, bring that all into the beliefs of the Oriental mystical religions too. Mix them all in as well. A united cocktail of abominations, shaken, stirred, and served in a cup for the woman on the beast to intoxicate the nations with. That's what this symbol up here was all about. It was promoted by Bono years ago, 10, 15 years ago, this coexist logo. I'd never seen it in a rainbow. I guess we're bringing the LGBTQIABCDEFG in, but I thought it looked pretty on a black background, so it's there just to remind us this is what the world's seeking. This is what the world's fighting for. How many religious symbols are here? And there's all these little ones at the top as well. It's all man-made. It's all religion. Yahusha said, I didn't come to bring peace. Stuff that, you know. Father against son, mother against mother-in-law, this, that. Those of your own family will be your worst enemies. I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword, you know. So, but religion in the world is trying to bring everything together, to unify. That's why there's a United Nations. It's all under the guise of the dragon. He's all in there doing it. There's just some examples of the syncretism, how they brought things in, ancient sun worship into religion. It's the same thing, different name, slightly. It's almost the same name, really. Same behaviour, you know. Birthday celebration, it's all about witchcraft. You know, the Wiccans and the warlocks and all that sort of stuff. Bringing a tree in from the grove, you know. Easter egg hunts is an example of cultural syncretism. Get a book called Fossilized Customs. If you're new to all this and are shocked, it's all pagan witchcraft out in the open and no one can see it. That's really the only book you need apart from the scriptures. Fossilized Customs, get that? It'll take you a while, you'll feel sick, but it will open your eyes to all the paganism. Like the Matrix here. Which pill do you want to take? Go back to sleep? Or do you want to see how deep the rabbit's hole goes? Anyway, this whole point of idolatry and syncretism, let's strip it back. The Yahusha principle, remember these principles and patterns we've been into. The pattern which undergirds the entire scripture from Genesis to Revelation is dividing, electing and separating. That's how you know Yahusha's in something. He's always dividing, electing, separating. Not like what the religion says. No, he doesn't bring peace. He separates people. He lifts one up. He favours one and not another. Shows favoritism based on our behaviour, of course. But he's always dividing, electing and separating. That's his pattern, starting from Genesis to Revelation. The created distinctions between Yahusha's people and those who are not his people are carefully defined which were which. And he demands that those distinctions be maintained. That's how he works. There's a difference between his people and the world. And he wants it to stay. Not the way they dress, not the way they drive, not the cars or the houses, none of the behaviour is different, you know. Syncretism is but the modern academic word for the dissolving of distinctions. This distinction between the world and Yahusha's people, between me and you, syncretism is just a modern way of getting rid of all the boundaries. Let's just mix together and get along. Let's just get along so there's no difference between you and me. That's what syncretism is. The dissolving of distinctions. It is the term for the reversal of the Yahusha principle of dividing, electing and separating. Syncretism is the reversing. So it's got to be Satan, isn't it? The enemy's way of reversing the principle of dividing, electing and separating. Bring everybody together. Don't worry about your beliefs. Just come together. Love everybody. Love one another. You know, it's ridiculous. Syncretism is what Nimrod strived for with the Tower of Babel as its monument. As we know, all idolatry comes from Nimrod in Babylon. Of course, it's all from Satan, really. But the syncretism that was the downfall of Israel in the era of the judges is the same that we are engulfed in today within religion. And the same that faces the true bride of Yahusha, who must be preparing and being purged of imperfections and immaturity, not looking to the right or the left, being distracted and getting a bit of pagan pleasure and carnal idolatry on the side. That's not what a true bride does. Her eyes firmly fixed on Yahusha. Remember, it's all about behaviour, not what banner or movement you hail to. Do you have eyes to see and ears to hear? The test is not to simply agree on an intellectual level, but to act upon that agreement and behave obediently. Yeah? So, Israel's overall situation as they enter the time of the judges is that the obedient leadership of Joshua and his immediate successors all but disappeared. The marvelous Torah-based standards were soon set aside for the kind of self-serving and pragmatic behaviours that we're all too familiar with in our modern politicians and corporate kingpins. This condition was not only reserved for the wicked, disobedient, or the backslidden leaders of Israel. So this condition was not only reserved for the wicked, disobedient, or the backslidden leaders of Israel, but practically every Shophet, every judge that Yahusha called upon had significant moral and character flaws, and the scriptures make no attempt to hide them. No attempt to hide them. So, none of the Shophetim of the book of Judges could hold a candle to the leadership skills and ethics of Moses, Joshua, Aaron, or Phinehas. Samson in particular is problematic. This grown man with the self-control and emotional capacity of a junior high schooler who was born under a Nazirite vow showed practically no interest in spiritual matters whatsoever. Yet he would be chosen by Yahusha to smite the enemy Philistines. Samson was a party animal, married a foreign girl, killed at times for his own pleasure or simply to show off, and his final undoing was a beautiful prostitute who seduced him with little effort. And as we go through each of the 7 main stories of deliverance, each by a different judge, we'll find a seriously dark side and equally perverted sense of morality inherent in each of them. But frankly, that's one of the reasons to believe the scripture. Nothing is whitewashed away, and even its heroes are shown to simply be what they were, flawed humans. Now, while this admittedly dark and pessimistic summation of Israel's condition at the time is accurate, to be balanced, it must be said that on the positive side, they did very well to maintain their tribal structure, and that when left alone, the tribes were generally harmonious. Of course they were. They had no one telling them to live obediently. It was when outside influences were exerted that one tribe or another would buckle under the pressure, and this would sometimes lead to intertribal warfare. Even then, there was no serious attempt at genocide of one Israelite tribe upon another, or even to erase the existence of a tribe by means of full and complete absorption by a more dominating tribe. All right, so we've come at this from a religious syncretism angle, and I'd like to bring it into the bride, because there's no point looking at how religion has been syncretized from Constantine to all that, to all this, into the church and this and that and this and that. Because the church isn't the bride, Christianity is not the bride, the Jewish movement is not the bride. In fact, they are the beast systems, the first and the second beast, you know. So how does that relate to the bride? Because the sheep and the goat, the wheat and the tares, the wise and the foolish maidens, they're not talking about religion, they're talking about the bride within the immersed Yahusha declaring people, you know. So how does that work? This is just an example of idolatry. There's one picture there. that we dealt with back in Deuteronomy. All the different ideas of idolatry, and then you've got more modern look at what idolatry is. All these things, it could be sport, multimedia, cars, automotive, it could be fishing, all these things, pornography, anything of a sensual nature, adultery, you know, all these things that go on Tinder and Grindr and all these apps that people get into. The LGBT sexuality movement, music, sport, like I said. So all these things can be modern idolatry. Anything you place, we dealt with this in our last video and Christopher was talking about it with the adoration. It's all about what you adore more than Yahusha. So let's continue. That was good timing as well. This is flowing from our last video. What do you adore? What, you know, look, idolatry is adoration, is love. Idolatry is adoration, is love. My sheep hear my voice. Let's finish this, guys. Through the syncretism and fusing together of religion, Yahusha's bride is able to mature. Through the syncretism and fusing together of religion, Yahusha's bride is able to mature and remain hidden amongst the insanity of religion. All that syncretized religion, we can hide amongst it, and no one truly knows what is happening inside of her, inside of us. The dragon is still doing all he can within the systems to snuff out the remnant that holds true to Yahusha's instructions, knowing that obedient behavior is their worship and the training that will ultimately mature them. But remember, syncretism, the mixture swill of the enemy, is very cunning and has permeated into the very fabric of the name of Yahusha wielding bride too. It's even amongst the bride, the Messianic Nazarene movement. This syncretism is still there because it's not a list of beliefs, it's not a chart, it's not a doctrine, it's a behavior. Doesn't matter what any of those other things you declare, if your behavior is the same as the world, as religion, if it's an abomination, if it's evil, it doesn't matter what movement you're in. You could be an immersed believer and still have abominable behavior. That is bringing the syncretism in, trying to force it to suit you. That is why half of the bride is foolish and won't make it into the wedding feast when the bridegroom arrives. We must always be on guard to not mix practices and behaviors that Yahusha hates into our lifestyle of serving and following him. Because as we know, as we said in our last video as well, even a drop of leaven, evil, disobedience, will completely ruin us and our expectation of immortality soon. Idolatry is not a brand, a label, a status, a banner, or even a group of beliefs. It is a behavior, and anyone who's anyone can have their race compromised and syncretized by demon forces in high places. They are highly intelligent, very wicked and cunning, seeking to stop your connection with Yahusha, so you stop listening to his voice. That is what syncretism in the bride is all about. That is why the demon powers are after you, trying to make you stumble, make you listen to other philosophies, make you look at things you shouldn't, make you adore things, make you rise up and get angry at things and essentially have the wrong behavior. Why? Because the wrong behavior will stir you up. The wrong behavior will cut you off from Yahusha. The wrong behavior will stop this connection, stop you hearing his voice. And that's what Satan's purpose is. Stop the connection with Yahusha so you stop listening to his voice. That's what 21st century idolatry is. And you can do that in any movement. I don't care if you've been immersed in the name of Yahusha and been walking on the word for 50 odd years. If your connection with Yahusha is not strong, if you are not listening to his voice day by day, you are in idolatry. Because if you're not listening to him, you're listening to something else. And you're following and obeying the pattern systems that have been put out by someone else. However, any individual that has been through the 12 steps of deliverance, any individual who has been through the 12 steps of deliverance can have the strength from Yahusha's reign on the portal of their circumcised hearts to say no, bypass all the obstacles and run. If you're not actively walking the 12-step path as laid out in Scripture, then what power or experience or deliverance are you having? Do you even remember what the 12 steps are? You're in a behavior revolution, aren't you? A behavior revolution of 12 steps. Do you even remember what they are? Key, blood, water, oil, door, word, feast, flog, fruits, the rules, gifts, mature. You got to get into these 12 steps. It's easy. So easy if people understand, where am I at? Where am I up to in this path here? I'm going through it. Because if you're not doing that, what power or experience or deliverance are you having? So stuff all the syncretism that's gone on through the history and through the ages. Let's look at the syncretism that's happening in your own home today. The mixing and melding of beliefs that's trying to happen. The pressure from the children, pressure from other partner, exes, pressure from the spouse, pressure from everybody around, trying to bring in other beliefs, other mindsets, other behaviors into your home. The 3 rules, let them all have it and just stand on Yahusha's word and you will get through everything you need to get through. That's been long enough today, guys. If you really want to go into the religious syncretism that went down, there's a link there that will take you to fossilized customs, all in about syncretism. If you want to watch the video about the 12 steps of deliverance, click that link there. That's been long enough today, guys. That's the introduction. The introductory note to the book of Judges, okay? So we should be well equipped now to get on with it and start the book of Judges from chapter 1. Stay strong, guys. Understand that we're all going through this together. Every single one of us is going through hell, trying to keep this together and keep the enemy out of this vessel. Don't lose sight of all the things we've been through, the divine property, the real estate. You are that divine real estate and he wants it. That's what the war and the dimensions, the war and the 𝗓𝗒𝕗 is all about. The hearts and minds of men and women. Taking this prized, beachside, oceanside, Yahusha side property that the enemy wants. He wants it. And don't be syncretized. Don't accept it. Don't try and make friends with the world. Yeah, you got to go to work. You got to have people around you and you be kind and pleasant to them, but don't take on their beliefs. Don't relax in their company. Don't take your armor off. Don't trust any of them. If Yahusha sends you among people to help and whatever, that's what you're there for, to love them, but don't take on anything they say or do as yours. Don't worship or behave like they do. No. Go Yahusha's way. See you later.